Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatiruttama-shloke Bhaktir-bhavati Naistiki Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnana-anjana-shalakaya Chakshurun-militam yena Tasmai Shri-gurave Namaha Shri-chaitanya-manobhishtam Sthapitam yena bhutale Svayam Rupa-kada Mahyam Dadati Svapadantikam Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna-preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 4, Chapter 4, Satī quits her body. So we are in the section where Satī, she was very severely insulted by the neglect and she decides to give up her body, and now she is finally consuming herself by the yogic power generated by her own personality from within. Srila Prabhupada writes, she is wife of Yogeshwara Lord Śiva. Okay. And that's how Sati is extremely powerful. And she is doing this to give up any connection with Daksha. So we're at text 27. Tatasvabharto charanambujasabam jagat gurorchintayantina chaparam ददर्श देहो हृतकल्मषं सती सद्य प्रज्ज्वाल समाद्यग्निना. Translation.
Sati concentrated all her meditation on the holy lotus feet of her husband Lord Shiva, who is the supreme spiritual master of all the world. Thus she became completely cleansed of all taints of sin and quit her body in a blazing fire by meditation on the fiery elements. Purport. Sati at once thought of the lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, who is one of the three great personalities of Godhead in charge of the management of the material world. And simply by meditating on his lotus feet, she derived such a great pleasure that she forgot everything in relationship with her body. This pleasure was certainly material because she gave up her body for another body that was also material, but by this example, we can appreciate the devotee's pleasure in concentrating his mind and attention on the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu or Krishna. There is such transcendental bliss in simply meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord that one can forget everything but the Lord's transcendental form. This is the perfection of yogic samadhi or ecstasy. In this verse, it is stated that by such meditation, she became free from all contamination. What was that contamination? The contamination was her concept of the body derived from Daksha, but she forgot that bodily relationship in trance. The purport is that when one becomes free from all bodily relationships within this material world and simply places himself in the position of an eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, it is to be understood that all the contamination of his material attachment has been burned by the blazing fires of transcendental ecstasy. It is not necessary for one to manifest a blazing fire externally. For if one forgets all his bodily relationships within this material world and becomes situated in his spiritual identity, it is said that one has been freed from all material contamination by the blazing fire of yogic samadhi or ecstasy. That is the topmost perfection of yoga. If one keeps his bodily relationships within this material world, and poses himself as a great yogi, he is not a bona fide yogi. In Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 2.4.15, it is stated, Yat Kirtanam, Yat Samaranam, simply by chanting the holy name of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, simply by remembering the lotus feet of Krishna, simply by offering prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is immediately freed from material contamination, the material bodily concept, by the blazing fire of ecstasy. This effect takes place immediately without a second's delay. According to Sri Jiva Goswami, that Sati quit her body means that she gave up within her heart her relationship with Daksha. Shri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also comments that since Sati is the superintendent deity of the external potency, when she quit her body, she did not get a spiritual body but simply transferred from the body she had received from Daksha. Other commentators also say that she immediately transferred herself into the womb of Menaka, her future mother. She gave up the body she had received from Daksha and immediately transferred herself to another, better body, but this does not mean that she got a spiritual body. Hare Krishna.
Very amazing verse. So this is how Sati Tata Swabhartur Charanambujam Savam. She meditated very deeply on the lotus feet of her great husband Swabhartur. Who is that? Jagat Gurur Chintayanti na Chaparam. Who is the Jagat Guru? Lord Shiva, Supreme Spiritual Master of all the worlds. And thus she was completely cleansed of all the taints of sin. Hatakalmasha Sati Sadhya Prajajvala. Now look at the verse, right? The words here. Sanskrit is such a language, and especially Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, that the verse itself is not different than the the happening or the the incident or the event, right? Or the leela that is being going on. Sadhya Prajajvala Samadhi Agnina. Okay, Samadhi Agnina. Agni that was produced, Jam means produced, Janmana, by her Samadhi. Sati concentrated all her meditation on the lotus feet of her husband, Lord Shiva, Jagadguru, the spiritual master of all the three worlds. Thus she was Dhritakalmashaha, completely cleansed of all the sins, and gave up her body, Kalevaram, by producing the fire based on her own meditation, Samadhi Ja Agnina. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, Sati showed a super excellent example of how to give up one's body by meditating on the Pranadhana deity. You're right. In Bhagavad Gita, we see Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam Tejati Ante Kalevaram Tam Tameva iti Kaunteya. How did Sati become Parvati? Because she was very deeply absorbed in meditation on lotus feet of Lord Shiva. Srila Prabhupada writes here that simply by meditating on the lotus feet of a great personality, one can forget everything relationship to one's body. What that means is that there is a pleasure. Prabhupada writes, of course, Sati gave up the material body and she received another material body because the body was not spiritual. Nainam dahati, you know that. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha. So the spiritual body would not have burnt, right? So Sati's body is, of course, material, and the next body also she got is also material. But the point here, Prabhupada says, when one is deeply absorbed in meditation on the lotus feet of the Lord, one can rise beyond the material contamination, right? Simply meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord is so powerful that one can actually transcend the material world. What is the meaning of meditating on the lotus feet? Meditating on the lotus feet means performing devotional service. So, there are many people, or sometimes, in every situation, phase, where everything is going wrong in one's material life, right? Like, children may not be listening, job, the boss has become very heavy, husband or wife, they are not somehow cooperating, and, body is not supporting, your investments are not doing well. So something is. But when one is engaged, so sometimes what happens is that when person is in such a situation, he may always think that, Prabhuji, what is the use of becoming devotee? Sab kuch to, everything is going wrong in my life. No, that is not the point. The point is that whatever is right and wrong is going, that is going according to one's prarabdha. If at all there is intervention from the Lord, it is surely the minimized one's suffering. Right. So that is one thing. Second thing is that in spite of all this, when one is engaged in performing seva, service in the temple, service to the Supreme Lord, performing devotional service, one can transcend the great misery, even up to the misery of giving up one's body. This is which is being exemplified here by Sati. And this is called as perfection of yogic samadhi. She became free from all contamination. Somebody may ask, what is the contamination? The contamination is the concept of the body was derived from Daksha. Srila Prabhupada says, the purport here is that when one becomes free from all bodily relationship within this world and simply places himself in the position of the eternal servant of the Supreme Lord, he is to be understood as Jivan Muktaha Sa Uchyate. And then Prabhupada writes very beautifully. Prabhupada says, one doesn't have to actually, now this process is very dramatic process. That Sati sat in the meditation, she just aroused her prana from one kundalini to another. She mixed it with dhiya, the intelligence, and broke through, the Brahmarandra. And at the simultaneously, she evoked the fiery element within the body, and the body was, the evaporate body was burned to ashes. And this is how she left the body. Now, while this may be the height of yogic perfection, Prabhupada says, for ordinary devotee, one doesn't have to do all this to become Jivan Mukta, right? Simply by chanting, simply by remembering the Supreme Lord, simply by offering prayers, one can become immediately free from material contamination. Achirena. Achirena means without a second's delay, one can become free from the material contamination. So the Prabhupada quotes here Bhagavatam 2.4.15. And what is Bhagavatam 2.4.15? This describes about how one can attain the spiritual elevation. Yat kirtanam, yat smaranam, yadikshanam, yat nandanam, yat shravanam, yadarahanam. Lokasya sadyo vidonoti kalmasham, tasmai subhadra savase, namo namaha. Very amazing verse. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto the all auspicious Sri Krishna, about whom glorification, remembrance, audience means taking darshan of the Lord, prayers, hearing, and worship can at once cleanse the effects of all the sins of the performer. Right? Lokasya sadyo vidunoti kalmasham. Right? Here we say rita kalmasham. Similarly, one doesn't have to go through all this yogic process to be freed from kalmasha. Simply by performing devotional service, yat kirtanam, yat smaranam, yadikshanam, yat nandanam, yat shravanam, yadarahanam, all these things can give the same result, Prabhupada writes, without seconds delay. Achirena. Very, very quickly, these results can come forward. When Srila Prabhupada quotes the three commentaries, that commentary by Jiva Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti, that what it means that she gave up her body. That means that in the heart, she just severed all her relationship with Daksha. And, and then she placed herself in the womb of Menaka, who is her future mother. And thus she is going to be born as the daughter of Parvataraj, Himalaya, and thus she is to be known as Parvati. And this is how, again, she got connected to Lord Shiva. Now we come to the next section of Bhagavatam, that after Sati gave up her body, there was a great hue and cry from the sky. And this is how text 28 to text 30. Text 28. तत्पश्यतां खे भुवुचाद्भुतं महत् हा हेति वाद समूहान जायत हन्त प्रिया दैवतमस्य देवी जहौ वसुन्केन सति प्रकोपिता. Translation.
Translation. When Sati annihilated her body in anger, there was tumultuous roar all over the universe. Why had Sati, the wife of the most respectable demigod, Lord Shiva, quit her body in such a manner? Purport. There was tumultuous roaring all over the universe in the societies of the demigods of different planets because Sati was the daughter of Daksha, the greatest of all kings, and the wife of Lord Shiva, the greatest of all demigods. Why did she become so angry that she gave up her body? Since she was the daughter of a great personality and wife of a great personality, she had nothing to desire, but still she gave up her body in dissatisfaction. Certainly, this was astonishing. One cannot attain complete satisfaction even if one is situated in the greatest material opulence. There was nothing Sati could not achieve, either from her relationship with her father or from her relationship with the greatest of the demigods, but still, for some reason, she was dissatisfied. Therefore, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1.2.6 explains that one has to achieve real satisfaction. Yayatma suprasiddhati. But Atma, the body, mind, and soul, all become completely satisfied only if one develops devotional service to the absolute truth. Cha vai pumasam paro dharma yato bhaktir adohakshasaja. Adohakshasaja means the absolute truth. If one can develop his unflinching love for the transcendental supreme personality of Godhead, that one can give complete satisfaction. Otherwise, there is no possibility of satisfaction in the material world or anywhere else. Hare Krishna.
Now, as soon as Sati annihilated her body in anger, there was a tumultuous roar all over the universe. People began to think, why did Sati? She is the daughter of Dakṣa Prajāpati, is the leader of all the kings. And she is wife of Lord Śiva, is the leader of his Mahadev, Devata, right? He's a Dev of the Dev, Mahadev. She had to quit her body in such a manner. So there was a tumultuous roar across the universe. And the purport Srila Prabhupada explains, the tumultuous roar across the universe because Sati was on such a respectable position from her parents' side and from her husband's side. And she personally was also extremely qualified. There was nothing that she could not have desired and she could not have achieved, and still she gave up her body, highlighting the nature of material world, dukkhalayam ashashvatam. Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavatam here that in this material world, even if we attain everything, there is always a dissatisfaction. And therefore, whenever misery comes in the life of a devotee should not become overly concerned or overly frustrated or overly, agitated by such misery. Sometimes the health may go very, very wrong. Recently, one devotee called me, such a grateful personality. Literally, for last 6 months, out of the 6 months, he's Pune, our own devotee. Of the 6 months, 4 months he is in the hospital. The one thing after another, just, within 2-3 weeks, again he gets the fever, consulting best of the doctors, consulting. And he's such a grateful personality. He's always thinking of, he just called me recently and he said that, Prabhuji, in spite of being so close to hospital, death and everything, still there is no Vairagya, Prabhuji. What can I do? There is no iota of thinking that I am devotee, why this is happening in my life. He has a very clear understanding of philosophy. Simple devotee, nice devotee. So, why? Because this is the nature of the material world. Now, what can be the greater position than daughter of Daksha? Or what can be the greater position than wife of Lord Śiva? And look at the life of Lord Śiva, right? When one sees the life of Lord Śiva, what happened? Nothing. He was sitting in assembly. He was just in a deep meditation on the Supreme Lord. He just did not stand up when his Shvasur, when his father-in-law entered. And what is the prize that he's praying? Who? Lord Śiva himself, right? So this is how the material world is constructed. And therefore, one should try from all the sides to, take care of the things, but one should be always aware. This is how the material world is created. Sometimes we may think that, life of Ambani must be so easy or Adani must be so easy. They have their own problems, right? In fact, the bigger the money, you have the problems which are unsolvable by money. And here we see Sati and Lord Śiva and Daksha. Look at the calamity that is happening. Srila Prabhupada writes, quotes Bhagavatam, Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhakti radhokshaje ahaituki apratihata yaya atma suprasidati. That the atma suprasidati can happen only when one is unflinchingly engaged in ahaituki apratihata devotional service. Otherwise, there is no possibility of satisfaction in the material world. This is the guarantee of the material world, and that guarantee Lord Krishna writes in Bhagavad Gita, Dukkhalayam ashashvatam. And therefore, although one should be, one should be very productive, resourceful in the material world, one should be protective of oneself and the family in the material world, but at the same time, one should be aware of this nature of the material world, right? This is like padam padam yap vipadam natesham. There is a danger at every step, and therefore one has to be a sense of detachment has to be there. Of course, detachment doesn't mean irresponsibility, but still there has to be a sense of detachment, especially in the progressive age of one's life. When one is progressing in one's life, 50, 55, 60, 65, then one should be slowly coming out of the material environment and positioning oneself in the spiritual environment. Text 29. I speak all these big things because they are part of purport, and somewhere I am also listening what I am speaking. So please, I mean, do not have the I do not have that kind of a mood that I'm giving some instruction or something to someone. It is just we are just discussing Srila Prabhupada's purports, and if at all it is like self-teaching, I am also teaching myself through these purports. Text 29. Aho anatmyam mahadasya paschata Prajāpateryasya charamacharam praja Jahau vasunyat vimatatmaja sati manasvini manam abhikshanam. Translation.
It was astonishing that Daksha, who was Prajapati, the maintainer of all living entities, was so disrespectful to his own daughter Sati, who was not only chaste but also a great soul, that she gave up her body because of his neglect. Purport: the word Anyatma is significant. Atmya means the life of the soul. So this word indicates that although Daksha appeared to be living, actually he was a dead body. Otherwise, how could he neglect Sati, who was his own daughter? It was the duty of Daksha to look after the maintenance and comfort of all living entities because he was situated as Prajapati, the governor of all living entities. Therefore, how is it that he neglected his own daughter, who was the most exalted and chaste woman, a great soul, and who therefore deserved the most respectful treatment from her father? The death of Sati because of her being neglected by Daksha, her father, was most astonishing to all the great demigods of the universe. Hare Krishna.
So within the universe, there was this discussion. Aho anatmyam mahadasya paschata. It is very astonishing that Daksha, who is a Prajapati, why Prajapati? Because he is the person who is supposed to be taking care of all living entities, let alone his own daughter, who is so extremely qualified, right? He's the maintainer of the living entities, is so disrespectful to his own daughter Sati that she gave up her body because of his neglect. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains there is anatmiya. So atmi means life of the soul, and Daksha, he behaved as anatmiya. Anatmi means great neglect. So Daksha was supposed to be duty bound to take care of all living entities. And then what to speak of a living entity who is a chaste personality, most exalted, great soul, and his own daughter, Sati. You are supposed to take care of everything, and not that except my own children. No. And when the children is such a qualified personality, Prabhupada writes here, she received all the respectful treatment, but still Daksha, out of his cruelty, and therefore anatma also means he's a personality without atma. He was a walking dead body. That means Daksha's death is also predicted by this word anatma here. So one thing is that. Second thing is, the greatest misery in our life will come from our near and dear ones. Sometimes they may speak something, sometimes they may behave in a way, sometimes in this case, Daksha is neglecting in such a way. And therefore, although one has to be very duty bound, one has to follow this principle of amanina manadena. Right? Realizing that most of my karma is going to come through by the closest of my relatives and friends. Most of my karma is going to come to me through my closest friends or relatives. And therefore, there is always a chance that, there will be misunderstanding, we will be severely offended or neglected in this case, and therefore we'll feel a great hurt. And that time, this is very important to remember, it is my own karma coming back to me, and my friend or relative is just a medium of that karma. Right. And then, the life becomes a little more uh, tolerable in that case. And that's how Mahaprabhu gives that formula. Amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. Text 30. सोऽयं दुर्मर्षहृदय सोऽयं दुर्मर्षहृदयो ब्रह्मदृक् लोकोपकीर्तिं महितिम् अवाप्स्यसि यदङ्गजां स्वां पुरुषाद्विदुद्यतां न प्रत्यदेशत् मृतये पराधतः. Translation.
Daksha, who is so hard-hearted that he is unworthy to be a Brahmana, will gain extensive ill fame because of his offenses to his daughter, because of not having prevented her death, and because of his great envy of the Supreme Personality of God. Purport: Daksha is described here as most hard-hearted and therefore unqualified to be a Brahmana. Brahmadruk is described by some commentators to mean Brahmabandhu or friend of the Brahmanas. A person who is born in a Brahmana family but has no Brahmanical qualifications is called a Brahmabandhu. Brahmanas are generally very soft-hearted and forbearing because they have the power to control the senses and the mind. Daksha, however, was not forbearing for the simple reason that his son-in-law, Lord Shiva, did not stand up to show him the formality of respect. He became so angry and hard-hearted that he tolerated even the death of his dearest daughter. Sati tried her best to mitigate the misunderstanding between the son-in-law and the father-in-law by coming to her father's house even without an invitation. And at that time, Daksha should have received her, forgetting all past misunderstandings. But he was so hard-hearted that he was unworthy to be called an Aryan or Brahmana. Thus, his ill fame still continues. Daksha means expert, and he was given this name because of his ability to beget many hundreds and thousands of children. Persons who are too sexually inclined and materialistic become so hard-hearted because of a slight loss of prestige that they can tolerate even the death of their children.
So now Daksha has become so hard-hardened that he is unworthy to be called even a Brahmana. And thus, Lokopakirtim, Apakirti, he will receive extensive ill fame because Mahatim Mavapsasi, because of offending a great personality. Who is that great personality? Sati. And not having prevented her death, Atma Angaja, who is her own part of his own body, because he is envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, Brahmadrik means Brahmabandhu. That means one who is born in the Brahmana family but without Brahminical qualifications. So the first quality of Brahmana, it is called as the Brahmana is very soft-hearted and forbearing and forgiving. This is the first quality, right? So Karuna is the root of Dharma. It is very important. Sometimes what happens is we see, some Yavanas being very hard-heartedly creating such a mischievous past in India. But to reply them, you cannot become like them. This is very important. If you become like them, then what is the difference between you and them? And therefore, Karuna is the root of, the root of the religion. And this is the first quality of a Brahmana, that he is supposed to be very soft-hearted and forbearing, because they have power to control mind and senses. Now, Daksha was not at all forbearing. For some simple reason that Lord Shiva is not standing up, he took the offense. He created a big drama there and became so offensive and so venomous that even his own daughter, she has forgetting all those past without any invitation. She has come. Daksha should have immediately, he should have settled the dispute. But Daksha, Prabhupada writes here, Daksha means expert, and he was too sexually inclined and materialistic. And therefore, for such a personality, what happens is that he just becomes another Hiranyakashipu. What is Hiranya? Hiranya means attached to gold, Kashipu means software. So when person is excessively attached to Bhogaishwarya Prasaktanam, Taya Aparitascetasam, Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Samadho na vidhiyate. For such a person, he becomes extremely hard-hearted, and they will not mind even the death of their own children. And the classic example of this is Hiranyakashipu. Only difference was Hiranyakashipu was outrightly a demon, and Daksha, in the garb of the devotee, he was also outright demon. Hiranyakashipu tried extensively for the death of Prahlad, and Daksha here is cause of the death of Satī, who is no less than Prahlad. And this is how Srila Prabhupada says that therefore this attachment to Bhoga and Aishwarya can lead to great hard-heartedness and can become a great stumbling block even for such a great personality like Daksha. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura
Jai.
Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you,
Jai.
Prabhupada. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada.
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you, Prabhupada.